All right, friends and family. In this week's episode of the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast, we will be highlighting COVID and midwives and birth workers when you get COVID. Because it's Leila here, and it's January 10th, and I have COVID. It's my first day of my third term of my first year of midwifery school, and I woke up with 102 fever, aches and chills like no other. And boy, these symptoms are so crazy. One minute I'm barely able to stand up and tachycardic, and then the next minute I'm kind of high with dry mouth and losing hair. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. And so I looked back at our introduction with our co-hosts, and we had a really beautiful, deep discussion about the reality of serving people with COVID, being a birth worker with COVID, and the world that we live in and how we're going to adapt and address living with COVID. All your love and thoughts this week as I heal up, and I hope you enjoy.
Hey, my name is Augustine Colebrook. I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. My focus is on big picture political movements that are happening within the profession, some of the controversial questions, and centering voices that are not being regularly heard.
I'm Leila Wyatt. I am a traveling student midwife, learning midwifery from cultures and a lineage of midwifery throughout the United States. I'm here to center the voices of students to hear their calling, their pathway, why they chose midwifery, and even share a bunch of birth stories along the way.
Greetings, I'm Jamarah Amani. I am a midwife, a mom, and a social justice activist. I am here to challenge white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and anything that keeps people from being their best and living their best selves, as we have the human right to do. And I am looking forward to sharing stories of birth justice on this podcast.
Hi there, I'm Delmar Bauta. I am non-binary, queer, transgender, Latinx, midwife, and full-spectrum doula. My focus is on increasing access and equity in midwifery care and midwifery education.
Hello, my name is Angie Love. I am a community nurse midwife in Vero Beach, Florida at the practice of Midwife Love. I also do telehealth midwifery through Midwife RX. I'm a mama, and I am committed to maintaining birth choices for all people and educating a future generation of midwives because we will not die out.
This COVID shit is heavy. That's all.
Yes.
I've had 4 known exposures to COVID in the past 2 weeks, and I've had the entire pandemic. I had 4 in 2 weeks and had to quarantine and test each time. One was a staff member, 2 were clients. And both of those clients were at 40 weeks, and so then had to have hospital births. And one 2 weeks later still hasn't seen her baby. So it's really fucking heavy. I feel are hurting and are just feeling really blindsided because I think everybody thought we were rounding some kind of a curve, and we're not. We're going backwards. So my days really have consisted of writing, rewriting, revising COVID policies, trying to order enough supplies for everybody that I love and everybody that I touch, checking on people, sending meals, trying to coordinate support that's safe, even if it's like, we'll just leave a meal outside your door. Trying to figure out how folks can still be with their babies and breastfeed. getting tested repeatedly, probably 6 times at this point in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, it's a lot. And one of the questions that I have, and this is, I know, like a really controversial question, but I don't hear a lot of midwives talking about the vaccine for people that are pregnant or trying to become pregnant or body feeding. And I think, I don't have the answer, but that's just a question for me. Just, I've seen like the ACOG statement and the CDC's updated statement, and I just haven't really heard much from midwives on this topic one way or the other.
It is such a controversial question, and it's such a individual choice, right? I mean, I think it's all of us. And anyway, the data and the statistics are changing so rapidly. It's hard to even know how to make a statement.
I made a Facebook video. I don't know if any of you guys saw it.
Yeah. I was on live when you did it.
Yeah.
I gotta check it.
Coming out very strongly that pregnant women should be getting this vaccine, especially anyone past the first trimester. Recommended they get the Moderna because it's latest research is showing it's a little more effective against the Delta. Yeah, so I did, which I'm sure, half of my clients maybe don't appreciate, but oh well. So yeah. It is a divided population I serve, and it's interesting navigating all of the differences. I have masking required inside my office, but then I have clients who hate masking. So I have an outdoor lounge chair. Today I was out, I think it was 11 a.m. here in the nice Florida heat, doing a prenatal outside on the lounge chair. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's some interesting things happening. I know that midwives here in Florida are receiving emails from Sunshine Health requesting / requiring them to report who is not vaccinated as part of their client list, which I think is an interesting boundary step inquiry as to why the insurance companies would like to know this information about your clients. And so if your client has decided not to get vaccinated, and so you send a report to Sunshine Health stating so, does that then increase chances that we could have some type of, we're in the moment right now where medical kidnapping is occurring because of a refusal of a B12 shot that may or may not have ever even been offered? Can not receiving a vaccine during pregnancy include child endangerment and therefore medical kidnapping of your newborn postpartum?
Oh, we are on a slippery slope, y'all. Ultimately, I think it's so good you brought this up, Leila, because it is not about vaccines at all. It's actually about medical sovereignty and authority of decision making. And it comes back to that same debate that we keep crossing over, which is like individual autonomy or public health. And parents they have this challenge when they're talking about all kinds of choices. But I think this has made that debate so prevalent, so at the forefront. Like, do I get to choose, or does society get to choose?
And I'm glad that Angie has that video, because it's so hard to find information, Angie, for people that can really trust. They really want to hear from a midwife, no, really, what do you think? And every midwife's, well, it's a personal choice. It's not circumcision, y'all. Let's talk about this. Really, what are the risks and benefits here of this vaccine? And I don't think a lot of people are giving good answers to pregnant people. So your videos.
Does EBB have some content out about it? I think they do. Yep. Delmar, have you read it?
I have, and it's excellent. They have a whole class on it.
That's what I thought.
Do they have midwives involved in that conversation on evidence-based birth?
I don't remember.
I haven't, I mean, maybe I'm out the loop because I hadn't seen Angie's video, which I'm going to go watch after we get off. But I hadn't seen any midwifery organizations make a statement, which is really what I was speaking to, because I think that you're right. People want to hear from midwives.
Yeah, ACNM did come out and recommend the vaccine as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And it's an unprecedented time that most of us have not lived through a pandemic as severe as this. And so all of the minor decisions of whether I'm going to vaccinate my child against measles, it's not that common, and that we have, pretty good treatments against, is different than in this time of pandemic where we have this new disease. We don't have the best remedies, and it's very, I think it's, some people are using the same logic as they did to whether they're going to get the polio vaccine, but it is a different situation. Yeah. It's a different risk profile, and I don't think anyone should be forced to get a vaccine. Of course not. And I'm going to take care of all of my clients, no matter what they choose. If they don't want to wear a mask, I'm meeting them where they are. I'm meeting them outside because I respect their rights. But if you're asking my advice, I'll tell it to you. Yeah.
Jamarah, you mentioned you had a 40-week client with COVID who delivered in the hospital. Is that a Florida policy, a practice policy, a personal policy, a patient request? Like, what did that look like and why?
You're saying why would someone risk out if they were COVID positive from home birth?
Where did the standards of doing that come? Was it your policy or the states or theirs, et cetera, or CDC's, et cetera? Like, where did that come from?
I haven't seen anything from the state. My guidance comes from MFM. It comes from my peer midwives that I'm, in constant, probably daily consult with.
Like, it's a community standard at this point for you guys?
I think it's also the most responsible thing to do in terms of caring for the other families that we serve, because once you attend someone's birth who is COVID positive, then you have to quarantine. So then as a midwife, I can't go to someone's birth 2 days later if I've been at a COVID positive client's birth. And so it takes my entire staff, my student midwife, my assistant, out the game until we are cleared. And so I think that healthcare workers in particular have to be really mindful that we can't be going from COVID positive family home environments, then into a clinic setting, then into the setting of a family who doesn't have COVID and just spreading those.
But that's exactly what they do in the hospital. And you are holding yourself to a higher standard than the hospital is, who would take care of a COVID birth using appropriate precautions and then go also take care of other people. So I'm not saying you're not being responsible, and I respect your choices. I have attended a COVID positive birth this past spring. So I have had a different experience in that. So.
And then what did you do after? Did you notify your other clients that you've been exposed to COVID and quarantine and test and all that?
No, I had been fully vaccinated at that time, as had my student, as had the doula who was attending her. And we wore N95 masks and used all the appropriate precautions. I took in 3 air filters from my office and put them all around. Both the mother and the father were still in their contagious period. He wore an N95. We all wore N95s. I don't think I had anyone do, for the next week. So I didn't feel the need to quarantine since I had used all of those appropriate precautions.
Yeah. And that's a really good, I think that the question I was having on kind of on both sides is the difference. This is not going to go away for the next couple of years. Like, this is the same problem that we're going to have tomorrow and 3 months from now, and maybe even 9 months from now, when it comes to exposures and a known exposure versus being exposed at the gas station is different because you're like, I know this. I know that I was exposed. I have to do what feels right to me, which maybe for Jamarah is to tell all of my patients, cancel all my prenatals and postpartums or move them to virtual, and hire a backup until I test negative and don't have symptoms 7 to 14 days later, or it is to transfer them because that's the way you can sustain your midwifery practice. I'm asking that question mainly because kind of to hear all of your perspectives, because my husband is an ER nurse and is exposed to COVID every day. He's like, Leila, we had 30 patients with COVID yesterday. Like, what do you mean I've had exposure? Like, yeah, I'm coming home after having exposure. So, when I was called to a COVID positive partner, the partner of the birthing person was COVID positive recently. She says, I've called 5 birth assistants and no one will come. And if I can't have a birth assistant, I will have to transfer them because I won't attend this birth alone. And I was like, well, if I wear a 95s gloves and a face shield the whole birth, how is this any different than my husband working with COVID patients every day? So I did, I attended the birth with full PPE, and then I did move all of my prenatals and postpartums to either virtual or postpone them, and then tested 7 days later. That's going to be my new norm, but everyone is going to have a different norm. And so I was just interested, Jamarah, if that was like your personal preference or if that was a law that, or a policy practice. And then Delmar and Augustine, like, how are you guys planning on adapting and developing? Because I don't think this is going away. I think this question of like, how do we attend COVID patients is going to stay.
I want to point out that to be able to say yes to going to a COVID positive birth is a position of privilege.
Yes.
Some of us are at much greater risk of dying or having long-term consequences from COVID than others of us. So is going to that one birth worth your life? Some of us don't have to really consider that question.
Very true, Delmar. I really appreciate that. And I had, just to point out, I had already had COVID over Christmas when I went to this birth in the spring. So
yeah, I would say just along those same lines, Delmar, also, I think that the region that you're in, the community that you're in, the backup availability, the choice possibilities also impacts the decisions that are made. And I think that midwives across the US and across the world have to make the best choices for themselves, for their clients, and based on their community standard of care. So it sounds like for Jamarah, at least, that's the community standard of care, that what makes sense. And there is somewhere for that person to go. I attended births at the birth center that I'm the clinical director at in India during the second wave of COVID in India. And our backup hospitals would not take them. So one of them stopped taking COVID clients altogether, and they're all for-profit hospitals, so they can make their own choices. One of them would take COVID patients, but my backup, we had this conversation, and she was like, look, unless they are incredibly symptomatic with a pulse ox under 95, I don't want to see them. I won't admit them. And so we had nowhere to send them, and you can't abandon clients at full term. And so I've attended a lot of COVID positive births, some even symptomatic, because there was nowhere to send them. But in that region of the world, in that particular environment, that was the safest, most appropriate thing to do given all the circumstances. And I don't think every midwife should make that choice. I think that we're all going to be needing to, we're all sort of skating around, figuring out case by case even. And I think that is appropriate. I don't think we can have hard and fast policies for many situations like this. We are all making it up and figuring out as we go along.
And I think that there are those of us that also may not attend or may choose not to attend, a client that has HIV or hepatitis B or something else highly contagious, because the risk to ourselves, our families, is too great. I have unvaccinated children at home that are too young to get the vaccine, a son with asthma. I also have a 90% Black practice population. So my concern about exposing other people goes a lot deeper, in the sense that I know that my clients are at greater risk.
Everything.
So it's not just like,
Yeah.
oh, well, if they get COVID from me, I had a client that 27-year-old and healthy went into COVID-induced preeclampsia overnight, from fever to HELP syndrome, literally the next day. There's not that's probably a higher occurrence in the demographic that I serve than in white populations. So I think there are different considerations depending on who you are and who you're serving.
Definitely.
And that's one of the things I love about midwifery care, is how unique it is and how we are taking so many different individual variables into account.
Yep, I'm definitely quoted as saying community-based midwifery is the hardest job on the planet. And I see all of you working harder than it's just amazing. All of this is amazing.